A European fintech startup processes large volumes of transactional data from several EU countries. Given its innovative use of blockchain technology, which GDPR article poses the most significant compliance challenge regarding the immutability of blockchain records? A. Article 5, 1, E, data minimization. B. Article 17, right to erasure, right to be forgotten. C. Article 25, data protection by design and by default. D. Article 35, data protection impact assessment. Correct answer, B. Article 17, right to erasure, right to be forgotten. During a GDPR audit, it is discovered that a company's data processing activities include profiling based on ethnic origin for the purpose of risk assessment. Which GDPR principle does this practice most clearly violate? A. Lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. B. Purpose limitation. C. Data minimization. D. Prohibition of processing special categories of personal data under Article 9. Correct answer, D. Prohibition of processing special categories of personal data under Article 9. A data subject residing in the EU requests a multinational corporation to transmit their personal data directly to another data controller, invoking their GDPR right. Which specific right is being exercised? A. Right to access. B. Right to data portability. C. Right to rectification. D. Right to restriction of processing. Correct answer, B. Right to data portability. An EU-based online marketplace uses automated algorithms to display personalized adverts. A user complains that they were unfairly denied a service based on this automated decision-making. What GDPR provision most directly addresses this user's complaint? A. Article 22, automated individual decision-making, including profiling. B. Article 21, right to object. C. Article 15, right of access by the data subject. D. Article 12, transparent information, communication, and modalities for the exercise of the rights of the data subject. Correct answer, A. Article 22, automated individual decision-making, including profiling. In which scenario would the use of legitimate interest assessment, LIA, be most critical under GDPR? A. When processing is necessary for compliance with a legal obligation to which the controller is subject. B. When processing personal data for direct marketing purposes to assess the balance between the data controller's interests and the data subject's rights. C. When obtaining explicit consent from data subjects for the processing of their personal data. D. When transferring personal data to a third country or international organization under the adequacy decision. Correct answer, B. When processing personal data for direct marketing purposes to assess the balance between the data controller's interests and the data subject's rights. GDPR defines consent with specific requirements. Which of the following scenarios represents a violation of these consent requirements? A. Consent is given in a written statement that also concerns other matters, with the request for consent presented in a clear and plain language. B. Consent is bundled as a non-negotiable part of terms and conditions for a service not contingent on the consented processing. C. Consent is obtained through an opt-out mechanism where the data subject must remove a pre-tick box. D. Consent requires an active opt-in from the data subject, such as ticking a box. Correct answer, C. Consent is obtained through an opt-out mechanism where the data subject must remove a pre-ticked box. An EU citizen moves to a country outside the EEA and requests an EU-based service provider to continue using their personal data. How does GDPR apply to the processing of this individual's data after their move? A. GDPR no longer applies because the data subject no longer resides in the EU. B. GDPR applies to the processing of personal data of EU citizens, regardless of their place of residence. C. GDPR applies only if the service provider offers services specifically targeted at EU residents. D. GDPR applies because the data was collected while the data subject was in the Correct answer, B. GDPR applies to the processing of personal data of EU citizens, regardless of their place of residence. Under the GDPR, which scenario would most likely require a data protection impact assessment, DPIA, to be conducted? A. Updating an internal employee contact list. B. Launching a new social media platform that uses algorithms to suggest friends based on users' behaviors and locations. C. A small bookstore introduces a basic website for displaying available titles. D. Sending out a monthly newsletter to customers who are subscribed to a mailing list. Correct answer, B. Launching a new social media platform that uses algorithms to suggest friends based on users' behaviors and locations. The GDPR introduces the right to data portability. Which of the following best describes a practical application of this right? A. A user can request that a social network delete their personal data. B. A user can demand that an email service provider stop processing their data. C. A user can transfer their personal data from one health app to another new app without hindrance. D. A user can ask a search engine to remove links to personal information about them that is inaccurate. Correct answer, C. A user can transfer their personal data from one health app to another new app without hindrance. In GDPR compliance, what distinguishes a controller from a processor? A. The processor is responsible for collecting data, whereas the controller determines the purposes and means of processing personal data. B. The controller is an EU-specific role, while the processor can be based outside the EU without adhering to GDPR. C. The controller determines the purposes and means of processing personal data, whereas the processor is responsible for processing personal data on behalf of the controller. D. The processor has the final say in the purposes of data processing, while the controller handles day-to-day data processing tasks. Correct answer, C. the controller determines the purposes and means of processing personal data, whereas the processor is responsible for processing personal data on behalf of the controller. Which of the following best exemplifies the GDPR's right to object in practice? A. An individual can request a copy of all personal data held by a data controller at any time. B. An individual refuses to allow a marketing firm to use their personal data for direct marketing purposes. C. A data subject asks a search engine to remove links to personal information about them due to the information being outdated. D. A person requests that a retailer deletes their user account and all associated data because they no longer wish to use the service. Correct answer. B. An individual refuses to allow a marketing firm to use their personal data for direct marketing purposes. Under GDPR, when is it permissible for an organization to process personal data related to criminal convictions and offenses? A. When the data subject has provided explicit consent for one or more specific purposes. B. Under the authority of EU or member state law providing for appropriate safeguards for the rights and freedoms of data subjects. C. If the processing is necessary for carrying out the obligations and exercising specific rights of the controller or the data subject in the field of employment and social security and social protection law. D. Both B and C are correct conditions for processing such data. Correct answer. D. Both B and C are correct conditions for processing such data. GDPR Article 22 outlines the data subject's rights regarding automated decision-making, including profiling. In what scenario could an organization legally refuse an individual's request not to be subject to a decision based solely on automated processing? A. When the decision is necessary for entering into, or performance of, a contract between the data subject and a data controller. B. If the decision is authorized by union or member state law to which the controller is subject and which also lays down suitable measures to safeguard the data subject's rights and freedoms and legitimate interests. C. With the explicit consent of the data subject. D. All of the above scenarios. Correct answer. D. All of the above are scenarios where an organization could legally refuse such a request.